said to me to say. He brings together the ancient wisdom of East and West, or is attempting to, bringing together the ancient wisdom of East and West into an understanding of where we are today. His lecture is entitled Love and Light in the Big City. Ladies and gentlemen, Nigel Grace.
Thank you very much. Love and Light in the Big City, I admit, may sound like a little bit like a television program. What I'm going to be talking about is with all of the global changes that we have heard prophesied over the last 3 days, can our global corporations be truly transformed to be guardians of planetary balance? And I really like the use of words. I've chosen the word balance, not sustainability, not emergence, balance. Because I want to talk about the balance of our economy and also the balance of our planetary living systems. Back in my university days, I met and befriended a man who has now become quite a well-known author and writer, and his name is Peter Russell. I caught up with him recently at one of his new book launches for his book From Science to God. And in the back of the audience, a guy stood up and said, "Peter, can you tell us what's the meaning of life?" And Peter, in his usual droll sense, said, "Oh, the meaning of life, that's easy. The purpose of life is to survive." "Oh, is that all?" He says, "Let me explain. Just to live is so wonderful that the purpose of life is to keep living, to keep on living. And it is so structured, that life is so structured, that there's a basis of balance, or what we call homeostasis. And when a system, a planet, a cell, a person is in homeostasis, then we feel good, we feel peaceful, we feel content. And it's in that state of homeostasis or balance, he said, that we can gather in, we can learn, we can imbibe in ourselves information from our environment so that we can grow and evolve. And so, with this idea of homeostasis, with balance, can we imagine a business, corporations, an economy that is based on homeostasis, that can bless us with abundance and can manage and maintain our planet from the point of view of balance across the needs of all of our communities and people? So that is where I would like to try and get to in my talk today. I don't know whether you can see this little pointer here. These organizations are the organizations that I've worked with and others for about 20 years as a consultant. So these are my clients. My company actually works in software development and design, and we help these clients to build more efficient and user-friendly systems. So my talk today is based on, yes, my clients, my experiences with these clients, but my concern is more broad than that. It's for everyone who works in the world, everyone who lives in a city, because that is where most of humanity lives and works today. Because you don't have to work for a global corporation to know that there's imbalance in the world. In fact, on my way here, I went to my local train station. Across the platform, there were 2 big billboards. One which says, well, you can't quite read it, I'm going to blow it up in a minute. It's about a global finance corporation, a bank, and the other one is for an AIDS charity. And it's quite interesting when you look at these two images together. You think how interesting that on two billboards next to each other, there's such a contrast between these bankers doing the big deals on the left and this poor but proud African tribeswoman, and in her hands is a small grain which will be her meal if she's lucky that day. As I look across the two posters, I'm thrown against the wording. Again, the wording is so important. Flexible financing, influential, responding quickly, raising long-term. The bid was successful. Capital investment. Everything she has to eat are in the palm of her hands. Complacent world leaders. The systems bust. Climate change. Rising food prices. As I stand there, I wonder, has anyone else noticed this? The obvious disparity. Perhaps if someone has, like the bankers who go up to London with me every day, perhaps when they sit down at their desk, they'll ponder that just the value of one morning's transaction in one of the banks in London would be sufficient to feed the people in Kenya for 1 year. Perhaps they might realize that the crops in Kenya have failed this year, leading to deaths of humans, animals, and livestock. So that's where I'd like to start. Because if we have such amazing technology that can accurately and reliably, within seconds, transfer money and technology around the world in seconds, how amazing it would be if we could use that same technology and transform it to overcome this human planetary tragedy. Well, I've always been a dreamer. I remember when I was just 19 years old, I had a dream about gaining incredible knowledge from university, so I went to university. As soon as I got there, I was totally bored. I remember going up to the library every evening to study. One evening, there wasn't a desk available, so I went down to the student cafe, but just before I went into the cafe, my head turned, and I saw a poster. And there was a man with long hair and a beard. So I walked up to it, and it was talking about meditation. I thought, instantly, this man's got more to teach me than this whole university. I walked up to it a bit more closely, and I still have the piece of the words that it said. It said, the changeless, eternal source of all manifestations, the source of everything, is pure consciousness. Consciousness. It's our deepest nature. It's our own being. It's the essential identity of each one of us. Yet, strange though it may be, we are ignorant of its existence. We live our lives without knowing it, but hardly had I read those words that I wanted it. So after I graduated, I went in search of the man in the poster who turned out to be the Maharishi, Mahesh Yogi. And I thought, if I gave 6 months of my life before I come and do a real job, studying Indian mythology and meditation, that would be really perfect. This is me at the age of 23. I'd already been working and studying with Maharishi for a year at that time. And I started to get to, I hardly had time to meditate. I was always involved with lectures, conferences, traveling, creating books, creating literature. And I always remember that one evening when this gentleman, the Maharishi from India, was talking to a huge audience, and I had snuck into the back, and I had developed at university one good thing, which was how to take notes. And I was sitting there, and I was taking accurate notes, and then he came to the end of the lecture, and he looked right over to me, and he said, "Come and read that to me later." No, he said, put it into English and read it to me later. Well, how he knew that I was taking notes, I don't know to this day. The thing is about working in that environment is that time doesn't seem to exist. Time is elastic. It could be night or day, you don't really know. And I think it was about 2:00 that night when I finally got into his meeting room and I sat there and read out what I had used my British education in sentence construction and read out to him what I thought was a plausible way of expressing what he had created, this beautiful poetry he'd read out. And he looked at me and he said, good, take it to the printers. And so out of that, I started to record his knowledge, his work. But it wasn't 6 months. I stayed and studied and worked with Maharishi for 18 years. And in fact, it was only at the age of 40 that I moved on, which I'll tell you about in a minute. But looking back on those 18 years, there are a few things that are indelibly imprinted, I would say, in my soul and in my mind. Listening to those words of wisdom, and I think not just him as an individual, but him as a representative of ancient knowledge from the East. I always remember him saying that everything in the universe is intimately connected. I remember him saying that the human nervous system that we've been gifted with, that our nervous system, our mind, is a perfect miniature representation of the universe. This is a galaxy, and this is the human brain with the synapses and neurons. But most of all, there are 5 words that I remember from those 18 years. And these 5 words of what's given me hope and inspiration that we can and will rebalance the world. And that is that knowledge is structured in consciousness. That our knowledge does not come from our brains, our universities. It comes from human consciousness. And if we could but change our consciousness, then what we see in the world, or the way we see the world, changes. But as time happens, my life with Maharishi did come to an end. And actually it was a blessing because I got married and moved to Canada. And there I had to get a job because I found, of course, getting married and inheriting 2 small boys, that I had a young family to take care of. So, well, I had to get a job because I found that money was something that was important. I never realized that before. And so I got a job as a salesperson in a software company and selling software in America and in Canada. And I quickly rose in the ranks and became quite good at it. And, well, it was complex software, but doing the very difficult after doing the impossible for Maharishi for 18 years was quite easy. But coming from that timeless, elastic, devotional life, I'd never thought about myself working in that environment. I just followed Maharishi's guidance from day to day. But now, working with clients in the real world, it was a bit of a contrast, as you can imagine. The first thing I noticed was sitting in front of clients. They were very serious. I remember one of the first early executives that I met from a telephone company, and she was talking to me as if her job and her company was the only thing that mattered to her in the world. And I was thinking, come on, lighten up. And I was about to say to her, do you really take this seriously? Then, of course, I realized she does take it seriously, as if her life depended on it. And the more I actually got into a position of meeting with clients, I realized that there was something intangible. There was some energy there. I couldn't quite identify it at first. And then I realized it was a sense of uneasiness. no. Then I realized I was sensing fear. Yes, perhaps it's fear about deadlines, keeping my job, making my sales targets. These are the sort of fears that I thought that this was about. But then I realized, no, it's something else. Yes, that's it. It's time. Instead of being in this elastic sense of fluid time, in this world of meditation and knowledge, everything was boxed into 3 months. 3 month sales deadlines, 3 months stock reports. It seemed as if life itself had been put into 3-month boxes. And when we lose contact with the continuity of life, then we feel a sense of unease. We feel disconnected with the flow of life, the natural flow of life. I always remember that Maharishi says that when man is cut off with the source of his own creation, which is pure consciousness, then he suffers. And it's only when we re-establish contact with our own nature, our own source, which is pure consciousness, then do we shed all sense of fear. So, let me move on from there. One thing I did was out in Vancouver where I was working. During the weekends, I found a refuge. I used to go out to a little place called Tofino, which is on the west coast of Vancouver Island. And here is a place that I could get out of the sales deadlines and being boxed in this 3-month thing. And I was able just to open up again and breathe the air. And with a few solitary people, I'd walk for many hours in the morning on this beautiful coastline. Well, one day I strolled from the beach to the little village of Tofino, and I walked into a really lovely art gallery. And I saw a painting, and it was the painting from a local artist, and here it is, of the same beach that I'd walked up many times, but here I was as if I was seeing it through his heart. And all of the beautiful symbolisms of the moon, the orcas beneath. The artist's name was Henry Roy Vickers, and he was a Native American or the First Nations artist. And usually they don't really talk very much to the white guys who come in because, after all, we were the ones who destroyed their culture and their sacred lands. But maybe it was because I was slightly unusual with my meditating background that he befriended me a little bit. And he told me that he and his people had lived on this coast for at least 10,000 years in harmony with the rich resources of the area. And he said, the trouble with you white guys is you really can't see what you destroy. And I took that, very personally, because he was looking at me as a representative of what he calls, you white guys. One day, he took me aside, and he said, I want to show you something. He says, this is a very ancient painting. It's called Our Beginnings. And in particular, he says, this face, this is the center of the galaxy. The word of our tribe is Nucha-Nulf, and Nutka means to circle around. And he said that no matter where the tribe is, we always are connected with the heart of the galaxy, so that wherever we move, wherever the tribe moves in the future and the present, we always bring with us the center of the universe. And, I was amazed at that. I'd like you to remember this. It's called Our Beginnings. But let's move on. So I thought that I'd found a perfect place of refuge on the east coast of Vancouver Island, where every weekend I could get away from the stresses and the deadlines and the fear that I was feeling in corporate America, or we could call corporate world. Actually, that was not to be the case. I had a very big lesson to learn here, a very big shock. When I was first married, my father-in-law took me deep into the interior of the island. No, not to give me a lesson. He wanted to show me the interior of the forests. After a long walk, we'd walked up to a plateau, and we looked out, and for the first time, I saw this beautiful green swathe of forest. And if you try and imagine this with me, it was almost as if this forest had not been touched or entered into by any human. It was just, it's almost like you could feel the spirit breathing in the forest. I know for sure that there was a lot of wildlife in that forest. Cougar, black bear, wolves, and of course mice, raccoons, martens, and a whole host of birds. And often I used to come up there alone by myself at the end of each week, and sometimes I would see a big black bear crashing through the undergrowth, or sometimes a flock of birds suddenly startled, alert, as a cougar, a mountain lion, would silently pace through the cool, soft floor of the forest. One week, after a particularly stressful week of making deadlines, not making deadlines in sales, I was really looking forward to coming back to the forest and just letting me breathe in that beautiful air. Funny thing was that as I was climbing up to the plateau, I didn't feel, there was a certain time that you couldn't see it, but you felt like you were coming in to the spirit of the forest before you saw it. I didn't have that feeling today. It's kind of empty feeling. But nevertheless, I kept on climbing, and as I got to the top, I was about to open my lungs to let in the air of the pines and the spruces. But all I could see was barren, burnt, black ground, and thousands of small stumps of trees, and the occasional pile of litter. It had been clear-cut. At that point, I think that I moved my life into being a dreamer, into having a vision. And I truly understood the bewilderment of the first people, the First Nations, because I realized those who sanctioned the clear cut did not see what they had destroyed. Well, I was deeply saddened, but I had a job and I had a family to support. So I went back to work on Monday. Actually, I had to fly down to San Francisco. I was giving a presentation of our deliverables. We just finished some work, some new software for an oil company. And I was to deliver the presentation and the new software with my client, the guy I was working with, Jim. And we gave a good presentation that day. We were on budget, on time. And Jim said, "My bosses are pleased." But the interesting thing was that as I was giving the presentation, in the corner of my eye, I noticed there was some demonstration going on side in the street against the oil company. So as I was giving my presentation, I was looking at the banners. And funnily enough, it wasn't about spillage or oil pollution. It was something about some indigenous people had gone missing in Ecuador who were known to be living in a certain forest that had now been cleared for oil extraction. And there was another a banner which said that someone had been killed in the demonstrations in Ecuador. Anyway, I finished my presentation, and Jim and I was getting very fond of Jim. He was a great guy. Before he got into the software in the oil company. He had worked in Kazakhstan, Azerbaijan, help me there, sorry, Ecuador, Nicaragua, Nigeria, Uganda. He was a great guy. And we were drinking a particularly wonderful glass of California red wine. By the time we got to the second glass, I said, Jim, what was that? What happened in Ecuador? And Jim's face suddenly changed. And he said, oil's a dirty business. Didn't say much more. He finished his glass of wine and went home. He didn't want to talk anymore. And as I saw Jim walk away, my heart really went out to him, because I realized that he was, to do his job, he was having to deny what he saw around him. It was almost like he was choosing to believe in a world without emotional intelligence, and to replace that with the way that the governments and businesses want us to think in terms of endless economic growth. And I felt sad that we as a society required good souls like Jim to witness and participate in environmental damage and destruction. So now I realized it's not about time. This fear I'm feeling, it's not about pressure, it's not about time. It's about denial. It's about being forced to deal with the truth. It's about voluntarily giving up your own ability to see the truth and substituting it with something else. I like to call it fabricated forgetfulness. You don't really forget, but you fabricate that you do. And that was finally what I realized was causing the fear in our world economy, in our big corporations. I went back to Vancouver with that in mind. I'd been invited to some potluck ceremonies, some tribal dances. This is the grandmothers hold the space. And I was told how the reason they dance, they say, this is why we dance. We dance for the rhythm of the drum, because in the rhythm of the drum, it entrains to the rhythm of our hearts. And like a newborn baby, their heart is entrained to the heart of the baby's mother. So through through the dance, our hearts are entrained with the heartbeat of the galactic mother, the center of the galaxy. And this is such a beautiful contrast to voluntarily cutting off your awareness of the world to being in the rhythm of the drum and the rhythm of the dance. And I always remember Maharishi said, we're gifted with this beautiful human nervous system that has the capacity to enliven what he called natural law. This is the way the universe, the intelligence of the universe functions. And that the gift that we have is the union of the heart and the mind in the human nervous system. So this is, for me, was a huge opening up, because what I was seeing after all these years, these 18 years of studying with the Maharishi, is that the same words that he was using, I now found echoed in the words of the grandmothers and the indigenous people. And so I realized that it is from the East indigenous and the West indigenous that they hold the memory of the balance of the universe and the world. Again, back to work. You see what my life was like. It was like a roller coaster. With this opening up of the human spirit that I was experiencing with the indigenous people, back to work, I was starting to notice a change over the years. I started to notice that as I was feeling this opening up, in day-to-day work, it felt like that the time was being even more compressed. It was like the time compression, the time boxes, were the tool in which the fear was maintained and could be kept on going. It was like we were locking down more and more, always feeling there's not enough time, there's not enough time. And we're always have to be available with our mobile devices. When we get an email from a client or our boss, it's expected we should answer within minutes. And so it's almost like we're in hyper-arousal at all times. The whole drive and emphasis of business seemed to be to continue to compress. Even selling courses came out. How to be a better salesman by compressing the cycle of time. And you notice here that perhaps even selling, there's now the selling sin of hoping and praying. I never knew that praying was a sin. Actually, it's a very catchy little phrase, isn't it? Very clever. But those who try to control us know the power of words. And I think that demonstrates it. And so with this compression of time, of doing more, selling more, there's also a compression of the feeling of less. Selling more with less time, working harder with less money, trying to make it with the less value of our homes. And so there was a greater contrast and a greater pushing into contraction rather than expansion. And it's very interesting that technology has really facilitated this. In that one little chart here, this is, I don't know whether you've heard of this is called Moore's Law. And he was the founder of Intel Technologies. And he predicted that over time, the amount of transistors or crystals that you can put into a circuit board increased in time. The interesting thing is that this has shown how the technology has enabled us to use faster and faster means, almost to the point where the amount of information coming through to us now actually outstrips the capability of the rational human brain to process it. Sorry, We actually are capable of just 40 conscious moments a second. But the fastest computer in the world is capable of 2.5 quadrillion processing moments. Now, this obviously is the fastest computer in the world in China. And it is called, in my very best Chinese, Tian Ke He Ha. And this syllable here, Tian, means overhead or cosmic. This means one. This means the most important one. This means a system, totally connected, flowing, a river. And when you put these characters together, in English it would translate to the Milky Way. And so the Chinese scientists obviously realized with this much information, they were actually replicating something as vast as the Milky Way. But remember, it's all data that is processed and analyzed on the rational side of the brain. If we were to think of a computer that's also on our planet, that is capable of calculating and tracking not only the rational data, although it's as big as the Milky Way, but also in terms of calculating consciousness, spirituality. There is such a computer, and guess, it's this one. I would like, could you please look at the center here? Now watch. Our beginnings. I actually, when I realized that I'd love to create another lecture on that, another talk, which I'd love to give you at another time, because this actually is a segue to something quite incredible and quite wonderful. And I'd love to spend some time developing that theme. The reason that I was so particularly interested in this from the point of view of technology is that, going back to interconnectedness, it's about the link to the cosmic mind. That if our economic systems and our banks, the way that we actually function in this planet through the corporations that we've created, can we link the intelligence of that to the functioning of the cosmos and to those natural laws? And this is what I believe the Mayans were interested in, is the evolution of consciousness. We all have I've talked about accelerating time, compressing of time. But actually, when I read the books and when I read about this, it wasn't so much about time that the Mayans were interested in, but it was a schedule of events, in each event marking an evolution. So, for example, at the beginning of time, it would take 1 billion years to create a solar system. I actually prefer to think of this progression in terms of the pyramids, where there were 9 overlapping cycles of time, where the bottom one would take 1 billion years for an evolutionary event to happen, and each one being 20 times shorter than the one before. On the 9th of March in 2011, we stepped onto the top here, and what took perhaps 1 billion years on this long count, an evolutionary event now happens every 18 days or every 2 weeks. Do you think corporations might be aware of this? I got an email. I'm going to read it to you because this email came to me in March. Hi, Nigel. Yeah. I hate to be awkward, but we're being pushed by the business to do 2 further releases this year, and we're having to switch to a method which is working in 2-week sprints. So no longer are we being evaluated in 3 months, but it's being compressed now that we're being evaluated and measured in 2-week cycles. Ah, my goodness. What I'm trying to say here is time is not important. The Mayans, when they created that calendar, to them, life is important. Actually, this is a quote from a film, a movie with Bruce Willis called The Fifth Element. Don't you love it, the way that filmmakers today are dropping in to an unsuspecting audience these perfect little nuggets of wisdom? Time is not important, only life important. I wanted to bring this up. I don't know whether any of you have heard of Dr. J.J. Hurtak. I met him in London about a year ago, and he describes how, as a very orthodox religious person, he was one night in a state of prayer, and a light filled the room, and he was summoned to ascend with that light if he was ready. He said he was ready. And in a very expanded level of reality that was filled with light, he was given various codes that he brought down and then created the book called the Keys, or the Keys of Enoch. And this particular key is very, very important to what I'm talking about. And it relates to, of course, what Peter was saying about of homeostasis. And it says the creations which survive are creations which desire that the species gather life and light into the image and similitude of the higher evolution, which is the living universe. The reason I wanted to put that up there is because we've heard all about this wonderful alignment. We've heard about the new age. We've heard about being touched by an angel earlier on this morning. I believe that the changes, the global changes that are going to happen, will not happen automatically. We need to desire, We need to be actively wishing and desiring, taking action. I always remember Maharishi said to me that it is the power of the universe, the natural law of the universe, needs the human nervous system to express itself in the creation. And so it is by us enlivening the source of our own spirit, the source of our own spirituality, our pure consciousness, our consciousness, with the universe, so to speak, that we actually can bring about this new balance. And so that's why it's so important that this code here is about we must desire it and we must gather in the light and life. I love this point about gathering light and life because it really points to the fact that the human body is rather like a code-reading device. We read light. It's rather like in the winter when there's not much light, then we sort of feel a little bit inward, reflexive. And then when the spring and the summer comes, we feel energetic and outward going. And that's how we use light. This is the date and the date and time that, according to the Mayans, that there will be this alignment. And I would like to suggest that this alignment indicates that this is a time, a most favorable time, when knowledge and information is accessed simultaneously throughout the creation. And remember that for the Native Americans, the core heart of the galaxy distinguished itself as being the highest form of truth in our universe. And it was also distinguished in the fact that our sun and the different suns in the solar systems would act as intermediaries as the knowledge would come from the truth of the center of the galaxy through the sun and into us. And so, for me, this was rather like in the brain again. Remember him saying that we're a perfect representation, a miniature representation of the universe. It's rather like in the brain synapses sending out to all parts of the brain instantaneously knowledge, information, so that the whole system, our body, can operate in health and harmony. And just so, I feel very intuitively that the alignment is about the spreading of knowledge, the most favorable time for knowledge about harmony and higher states of consciousness to reach our planet. But this actually, according to modern science, is not really possible, or at least it would have had to have started 26,000 years ago, that the sun would have thought, well, in 26,000 years, those people on that planet will need this information, so let's start sending the sun out. Because in our way we look in our linear brains, we see, when we look out to the stars, time traveling backwards. In other words, it started a long, long time ago. And so I knew that that wasn't right. I mean, or at least it was right, but I knew that our ancestors, our indigenous people, they knew better than that. Because they knew that wherever they moved, their hearts would move with the core of the galaxy. They were always at the center of the galaxy. So in my heart, I was searching for a way to describe that, because I knew that just like the brain instantaneously sends out knowledge to the rest of the system, so the core of the galaxy would send out knowledge and information at this time of this great alignment. I put B.J. King is a mystic who I met in America. I was introduced to her. And I put her up here because I worked with her for about 10 years. And she called me one day and she says, the people I work with interdimensionally and intergalactically, they have some information for you, which is going to be very important in coming years. So I called her up and we had a session where she went into her state of communication with her spiritual guides. And they said, what we want to communicate to you is about time. And BJ said to me, what I am being shown is an infinity loop, 3 infinity loops, 1 vertical and 2 horizontal, in a pyramid, so that the infinity loops are touching on 7 sides of the inside of the pyramid. And what they are telling us is that at the point of the intersection of these infinity loops, time does not exist. And if you were but to place yourself at the center of the infinity loops, there would be no aging. And then she informed me that what I am hearing is that it's important for us to know that this is how light travels to the world. That was 8 years ago that I got that information, and I didn't know what to do with it. I didn't know how to write about it or talk about it. When I was preparing for this lecture today, I wanted to show you some images, so I went onto the NASA website and to Google, and I had this in mind, and I had this problem. How can I describe this simultaneity of instantaneous, non-localized time that the core of the galaxy would be sharing with us, that our hearts now, at the alignment, would be linked with the core of the galaxy? Didn't know. And then, on my laptop, this picture popped up. These are gamma rays, and I read about it, and it said this is actually from the Fermi Gamma Space Telescope. And I thought, no, please, no. I mean, really? And I looked a little bit more deeply into it, and I read, by the way, thank you to the artist here. I don't know who the artist was, but this is rather lovely. We don't fully understand their nature or origin. I was reading a book at the time by Barbara Marciniak. I'm sure many of you have read her books, called The Path of Empowerment. I turned the page just when I looked at that image, and it read, the sun plays a primary role in relaying light-encoded information by transmitting and dispersing blueprints of consciousness and ideas about reality on gamma rays, which are a form of high-frequency radiation. These balloons that we saw, which were the perfect infinity loops, are actually gamma. And then I went back to this is amazing. Then I went back to the NASA site again, and I looked, and the image wasn't there, and this had just popped up, which is a conceptual drawing, but it says, gamma rays create bright afterglows. Their light encodes information about dust and other inner space particle it encounters on its way to Earth. I'm not a scientist or a PhD in astrophysics, but I'm intrigued in the way that this information came to me, and it inspires me to feel and intuitively think that at this time of alignment, that time is non-localized, that we don't need to continue to think anymore about linear space and the speed of light, and that at the time of the alignment, there will be, as the Native Americans always say, a direct connection with heart and heart. And so, this is our sun, and you're going to be hearing some music that was written for J.J. Hurtak in the Keys of Enoch that's called Limitless Light. While you're listening to this music, I wanted to say that if you can imagine, as the Mayans predicted, that there would be an increase in solar activity, but not to be afraid of this. Because this, after all, is just the transmission of thought and ideas about reality from the heart of the galaxy to us through our sun. And I think the true significance, the true meaning about the alignment is that as the damage to our planet reaches a non-return point, and as our fear and anger caused by this inner conflict of fabricated forgetfulness reaches a point, then, as the indigenous people would say, the compassionate heart of our galactic mother moves to restore the memory, our memory, of our greater identity. And this is the significance of the alignment. And the significance is to remove the fear that has become endemic to our species, to remove that special fear. And I also feel that we can't just leave. We just can't just leave this planet through special suicide and let the planet recover after we leave. In management speak, we would say that's not acceptable. But instead, we need to desire to restore experience of direct knowledge of our source. And this is the gift that I believe that we are receiving at this time. And this gives us the ability to tell the difference between knowledge and truth and deceit. And this means that we can trust in our own power. We can trust that we are creators of our own reality. For I believe that the planetary damage that we see is a symbol of society's denial to effectively deal with the truth. Click. So, in closing, I think I have 5 minutes or 10 minutes? 7 minutes. Oh, that's cosmic, isn't it? I heard that Macmillan Bloedel, the Canadian logging company, a few years ago, had a dramatic change in its policy. It announced that it was stopping logging of first growth forests. But when they came onto the podium to speak about it, they didn't admit that it had anything to do with the protests, the anti-logging camps, the boycotts on their products. They wouldn't really admit that. Later on, one of the vice presidents came and spoke privately to a group. And, he said that his daughter once came up to him with sadness in her eyes. And she said, "Daddy, don't you know that if you continue to log these beautiful trees, there's going to be no future for us? There's going to be no future for your grandchildren." Within that one sentence, she went straight through to his heart. 100 years of destruction was changed and halted. Now, he made that decision in a heartbeat, which is actually faster than a computer. And that's where the power of human intuition, Maharishi calls it unity consciousness. It's where the heart and the mind, fully developed, work as one. We can call it intuition, but it's more than that. It's the development of the full human potential. And so it is through the growth of the heart, the union of the mind and the heart, that we see the possibility and also the speed of rebalance. I want to end with what we call in business a case study. Because with the growth of technology there is the growth, the potential for advanced technology to be able to unify all technology in a wearable piece of technology like this. So all the internet, all your banking, all your purchases, all your communications is activated through thought. And of course, with the Qiankehao computer, by tracking that, of course, the computer will be able to find out what those thoughts are. So banks and telephone companies very interested into where technology is going. Of course, they don't know that we're just children trying to mimic the universe. However, my company was called, and this is going to take 5 minutes, if that's all right, to find out how can we understand the future of mobile phones, how can we understand the future of communication. So we went there with my boss to the Europe's largest mobile manufacturer and supplier in Germany. And they challenged us with this concept, and my boss suggested anthropology, ethnography. No, we've done all that. I just happened, as I always do when I go to sales meetings, to read up about the people I'm going to be meeting, and I noticed that the director of research was very interested in time travel. So the meeting was about to end, and I said, I know what we should do. We should do a time travel workshop. And trying to avoid my boss kicking me in the shins, the director looked at me and says, yes, that's what we'll do. We'll do a time travel workshop, and all the people from my group will be in it. So then I said, well, I promise that I'll get you a proposal and write it back to you. So I went home with my boss, and he gave me a black look, and he said, try and get out of that one. I remember that my family had been to a family summer festival at Gaunt's house, and which was a wonderful, wonderful spiritual workshop. And I took part in a shamanic journey by Leo Rutherford, who runs the Eagle's Wing School of Shamanism in Sussex. And I took part in a drumming journey, Native American drumming journey. I called up Leo. I said, Leo, I think I've just sold a time travel workshop to the world's biggest mobile phone company. Can you come and do a drumming session? And he says, yes, of course, no problem at all. So we went to Germany on a winter's day, and we this is the shaman's drum. And I did actually create a proposal that talked about, in proposal business language, how using safe methods of holistic psychotherapy, we go into a non-localized state through the rhythmicity of the drum with 200 to 200 beats a minute, thereby getting us out of local time-space. And there, if we have the intention, we can move within that non-localized time to a place. And as Leo went there, he started to smudge the offices with his feather and smudge. Everyone came running. What's that smell? As, of course, at Gaunt's house, we all lay down on blankets and cushions to go through the drumming journey into the future. There we are with our suits, sitting on the conference chairs. And Leo did a quick demonstration. Went very well. The director of research, I know what, we should all lie down on the floor. So we lay down. It was decided that the theme or the intention of the journey was to investigate how humans are communicating between each other in the future. Now, I'm biting my lip not to say the name. This company, this mobile phone manufacturer, already had its product plans out to 2015. So there's no point doing it there. So we decided to go into the drumming journey from 2015 out to 2030 in 5-year intervals. After the end of each drumming session, then the participants were asked to say what they heard, what they felt, what they heard, what they saw, anything. and we wrote it down. I wanted to emphasize to you that these people in the German office, they'd never heard of the mind calendar. They'd never heard of alignment. They'd never really heard of spirituality. Please use your discernment when you see this. I'm not altering what they said in any way. What we wrote down was a fairly unanimous, or at least we saw patterns, and these are the real words. So the drumming starts, finishes. In 2015, political situation changing. These were their words. Frustration with technological devices. Politicians not speaking from the heart. Confusion. People seeking meaning. Children speaking another language, going against meaning of the accepted language. Another session. 2020. What was heard, what was felt, what was seen. Serious changes, a breakaway, in order to create a cleaner world. People are speaking about our connection between the land and the earth. No telephones or mobile phones. Everyone has wearable earpieces for communication. Knowledge is made available from the pyramids. People wanting green farming. 2025, another session. Cheap computers for kids in Africa. 2025, a wrecked planet. Red-colored seas and fires everywhere. These people had never heard of the alignment, never heard of the mind calendar. These were business people going through the drumming journey. Crash. Digital is gone. No trust in technology. Sharing solutions globally, not through digital networks, but higher forms of remote forums. People voluntarily joining together, learning, implementing, creation of biological touch and interact communications technology, using traditional handwriting, development of information sharing like the Outernet. We felt like we were going now. We wanted to do that 5 extra years to 2030. A world empty of devices. People talking directly, learning from animals to hear long distance. Going beyond technology by becoming it. Consciousness. Eating knowledge, gathering. Gathering knowledge, eating knowledge, their words, from water and the air. Being able to touch a tree to get information. Balancing the senses. Direct communication from brain to brain. Accessing information from a global memory. Like a second brain, able to manage all information for me as a person. Advancing as a species, we are all closer, all and authentic together. After the enthusiasm of reporting all those points, there was a silence. And one person said, I think this means that we are so much more than we ever thought we were. One of the professors from the Research Institute said, you know, I've spent my whole life trying to understand this man, Victor Schauberger. Now I understand how he used the natural power of the earth. Have I just got 1 minute? You see, this is about signs. This is about investigating signs of our times. I think that the fact that a child, obviously we've seen some wonderful signs. Crop circles, the near, not so wonderful signs, also very important. The near collapse of a currency, being given the awareness of deceit. I also believe, just as much as those are signs, I believe that a child being able to stop 100 years of destruction is also a sign. I also believe that people coming together and experiencing this, and experiencing that we are actually so much more, and we have the ability in our own human nervous systems to touch on a level of life which is universal, and experience it together, and see and feel things which are common to our human experience. One also wonderful sign of our time, I cannot take credit that this is a result of the workshop, is now that the leaders of the mobile phone industry are meeting together once a year at a festival. They call it a conference festival, and they've chosen a word, love. M for mobile, love. You know, the choice of words is very significant. This is about bringing together 200 thought leaders to discuss the powerful potential of the mobile phone to act as a catalyst for community change and inspiration. Look at the people on the right. It's called M-Love. But it's not just business leaders, it's normal people working in the city, doing their jobs, coming to events like this, and they're talking about the most important thing for them is their pledge for our future, balancing humanity, technology, and commerce, is key. The keys. And this is what they're reporting. Examples in research how mobile helps in emergency relief for people and nations in need. A passionate wake-up call to save the planet by sharing data of sustainability. A first-hand study from Mexico how mobile phones can revolutionize the way children learn. I'm just finishing now. But I wanted to say that on my way to the train station, looking at those two billboards, those two posters, there were some words that I missed the first time. They were just at the bottom, and they simply say, "Together we can fix it." Thank you very much.
Nigel Grace, fantastic.